the 50, and the Ravens. They're all here to see the Colts.
The Green Bay Packers have won the Super Bowl.
To make the grab, but the Rams now running down to Sullivan.
First question to you, it's an easy one. You're the MVP of Super Bowl 54. Where are you going?
Something I've wanted to say my whole life. I'm going to
North Point Church.
Can I go with you?
Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, he is. Hey, welcome to North Point. Great to have you with us today. I want to say hello to our Springfield campus. Good to see ya. Getting y'all prayers in before the game. I see how it works. Hey, I want to welcome our other campuses who are joining us right now through this beautiful power of technology. We have our Nixa campus. Would you welcome the Nixa campus with us? And keep your hands going for our Republic campus. We love you, Republic. And we saved the best for last, didn't we, Dream Center campus? Thank you for being here. Welcome to each of you. What a great day if you're joining us online. Thanks for doing that, whether you're joining us live. We hope you ask some very good questions in the chat room to our online hosts. If you're catching us later through a link, thanks for being with us as well. Today, we're wrapping up this series. It's the third week in a series on the same story in Scripture called Chasing the Ring. And we have all of our notes in our app, our North Point Mo app, if you want to take notes or follow along. And speaking of apps, on the count of three, I want you all to yell out your favorite Super Bowl app, okay? Favorite snack for the Super Bowl on the count of three. Think about it. You're not trying to impress anyone with your health choices. On the count of three, favorite Super Bowl snack. 1, 2, 3. Broccoli, huh? Very good. That's awesome. Did you know they say today is the second highest food consumption day in the American calendar? The average American will consume 2,400 calories during the game today. USA, USA, we got this, man. And I am above average. I'm excited about that. Here's the deal. They say that over 11.5 million pounds of potato chips get consumed today. And I don't know if you've ever weighed a potato chip, but that's a lot of chips because unless they're that pita stuff, okay, they're not very heavy. So that's a lot of chips. They say today that we have over 1.3 billion with a B chicken wings consumed by Americans. How many of you are going to have some chicken wings today? 1.3 billion. Think about that. That's 650 million chicken who gave up their life for you to watch the Chiefs today. So here's to you, chicken. That's awesome. So today, and if you're making bad food choices today, at least pick up some of the broccoli on that spread and give it a free paper plate ride to the trash can. Just at least tease it for a little bit. Today is the first time since third grade. Well, that's our annual reminder that third grade wasn't a total waste. That Roman numeral education comes into play right now. Because you're like, what is LV2? Okay. It's 57. You remember that from third grade. And so today, if you're watching episode 57, I do recommend you don't try that without watching the first 56 episodes. So binge that, and then you'll be all caught up for today's action. But we are all about the Chiefs in Missouri. So if you're an Eagles fan, any Eagles fans here? That's smart. Okay. He's not in Springfield. How many of you are wearing some Super Bowl attire? Anybody wearing some colors today? Okay. I did not, and people have questioned my passion for the Chiefs because of the lack of Chiefs gear. You have got me way off. okay? I last wore a jersey during a game on church the last time they lost to the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. So because I'm passionate for the Chiefs, refuse to jinx them and wear a jersey today. As a matter of fact, I almost wore an Eagles jersey just in case that would throw them off the scent there, but I'll be changing into one. But here's what we'll see throughout this weekend is how people, they act crazy when they're in love with something, right? And that's the top of my notes, that love makes you act all crazy like. Love makes you act absolutely bonkers. Did you know that the word fan is short for the word fanatic or fanatical or crazy, okay? Why? When you're passionate about something, you get crazy. I mean, when someone throws a little yellow hanky at your team today, you're gonna go crazy. If someone does a late hit on Mahomes and they don't get a whistle, you're gonna go crazy. Why? Because love makes you act crazy. How many of you remember being in love? And if you're sitting next to him, just raise your hand. Okay, you remember being in love, right? I mean, love will make you do crazy things. You stay on the phone. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up. On the count of three, we'll both hang up. 1, 2, 3. You still there, right? Like, it's like, I don't know why I do this still. Okay, but love makes you do crazy things. As a parent, I was one of those guys who I was never one who hung out with like little kids. I didn't practice being a parent before I was a parent. I never babysat. I didn't put a piece of paper at the Panera bulletin board with little slits of my phone number there in case you need someone to help babysit your kids. I'm your guy. That's not me. If you had a little baby and I was near you before I had a kid and you said, would you like to hold them? I'd say, no, thanks. I'm fine. I'm not into holding kids. They're slippery, all that kind of stuff, right? But then I became a parent and everything changed, right? Why? Love makes you act crazy. You start talking little bitty baby stuff, right? You buy them little bitty baby Jordan shoes and you just get excited. Why? Because love makes you act crazy. I remember when my kids started playing sports, I never wanted to be that crazy dad, that sports dad. But then when Sydney started playing soccer, I'm like, oh my word, okay. I became that guy. We were in Seattle. I think she was 7 at the time, playing indoor soccer. And I'm pushing out nannies to get a better view of my daughter playing soccer. And soccer wasn't her God-given sport. And so, she didn't score a ton, but I would just scream no matter what. And there was one time she scored her only career goal, technically waved off by the ref, but it did squirt its way through into the goal. And I wanted to run down there, pull my shirt over my head, slide on the AstroTurf, goal! Why? Because it's my daughter, right? Love makes you act crazy. And I've never been that way with pets, but some of y'all are like that with pets, and you need to know that because we all do. You need to know you're weird with your pets. I have never understood people's affection for their pets. I'm just like, I don't get it. It's a dog. Until this last summer when my girls were living at home for the summer and my oldest daughter got a dog, a little puppy, and it was a Cavapoo. If you don't know what a Cavapoo is, it's half Saint, not Saint Charles. It's a half Christian, okay? And then half poo, okay? The back half is the poo, okay? And so you got this and name's Millie. And I'm like, I don't want a dog in our house, right? You should wait until you go back to Florida to get a dog. I don't want it in our house all summer. But then the dog came into our house. And I started falling in love with Millie. As a matter of fact, I got a picture of me and Millie. So isn't that cute? Did you see the dog though? Isn't that cute, right? So here's the deal. So Millie changed everything for me. I didn't know I was a dog guy. Big dog guy right here, right? And so now when I like FaceTime the girls, I'm like, where's Millie? And Millie and I bone. I'm like, who want a bone? Who little good girl, right? And I'm like all over it, buying Millie presents, wishing Millie would come visit, paying the extra for it to fly on the plane, right? I'm like, this is awesome. Why? Love makes you act crazy. And what I want to talk about in today's part of the story we've been looking at for the last 3 weeks is this idea that a lovesick father is going to do crazy things. And the story that we've been talking about is about a Father God, and it's Jesus telling a story about an earthly dad to help people get a better idea of what a heavenly Father is all about. And it says in another verse, the most famous verse, the one that Tim Tebow invented, John 3:16. It says this, that God so loved the world, right? The Father God had such a bad case of the so loves, he started acting crazy. Like he started thinking, okay, what do I have to do to have relationship with the one I created? What do I have to do? And in this love, this story that we've been looking at, and if you missed the last couple of weeks, we'll catch you up in a hurry, right? But bottom line, it's a story to help people understand how bad God's got it for you. So it's a story, Jesus, the context. So here's what you missed in the last couple episodes is the context is Jesus is talking to people who were considered outcasts, dismissed, not valued in the society. Now, again, this was 2,000 years ago, first century Near Eastern culture, fairly conservative today, a little bit more conservative 2,000 years ago. And these were people who didn't fit into the societal norms, and they certainly found themselves on the outside of any type of faith religious system in a culture that was dominated by a religious system, a Jewish culture 2,000 years ago. So these guys were the left outs in that culture. And Jesus was talking to them. And when he's talking to them, the big dogs in the synagogues, the religious leaders, the spiritual elite people of that day, these Jewish leaders, religious leaders, they saw Jesus rubbing shoulders with the riffraff. And they were so good at riffraffing, instead of being encouraged and be like, isn't that cool that Jesus is hanging out with them? I bet they're going to start having an upturn in their life because they're hanging out with Jesus. They were better at riffraffing than they thought Jesus was good at Jesus, Ian, or whatever it was. And so they all of a sudden, instead of thinking good about these people, they started having doubts about Jesus. They're like, bummer. I thought that guy had potential, but look who he's hanging out with. There's no way this is God's son. And here they are, these big religious leaders judging. So Jesus is talking to two types of people. People who feel they're unworthy and have been told they're unworthy and that God doesn't like them because of what they've done. And people who think they've earned it. So Jesus, being Jesus, says once upon a time, there's a story about a dad who had two kids. One did everything right and thought he earned the father's love. The other did everything wrong. Goes to his dad and says, Dad, you're loaded and I've got dreams and I'm tired of waiting for you to die. And so would you just hurry up and give me my inheritance because I got a life to live and I can't wait for you to stop living your life. Can you please give me my inheritance early? And the dad, much to the chagrin of the call-in show for Dave Ramsey, says, okay, I'll just empty my inheritance and give it to my kid. He at least should have done, this was scandalous. He should have at least said, if I'm going to give you the inheritance, I'm going to give you half now, and then there'll be a 5-year clause, and if you blow the first half, hopefully you'll learn the lesson, and then the next 5 years, you'll be more prepared to handle the wealth that comes to you, right? But he didn't do any of that sound financial advice. Instead, he's like, here you go. This is all I have for you. And it says the son went off to a distant land and squandered his wealth. His is a loose term. It's actually dad's wealth in wild living. Not mild living, wild living. We talked about that in the series. And then it says he even got so desperate when he was broke, out of money, out of resources, out of friends. It says he longed to fill his stomach with food that pigs were eating at the pig farm he was working at. Now again, Jesus was the Steven Spielberg of his day, okay? He knew how to draw you into this story. He's talking to Jewish people about a Jewish dad, about this rogue Jewish boy who's now working on a pig farm. I can't imagine what Facebook post was harder for this Jewish father to scroll past that his son gets a job at a pig farm, and now he's got this banquet with pig food he's eating, and he's hashtagging that on Instagram, and his father's like, "You have shamed our family. I cannot believe what my son is doing. He's just doing this to bait me." You can't be more profane for a first century Jew than to do that to your dad. So these guys are just mad. And then Jesus says, this kid, after doing everything he thought he wanted to do, was empty. And then it says he came to his senses. That's where we left off last week. And I want to read it. It's starting in verse 17 of Luke 15. I'll have it on the screen on your app. It says it this way. When the kid came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I'll set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against you and against God. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Hire me, make me as one of your hired servants.'" That's his rehearsed speech. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like... Father, I've sinned against heaven and against..." And he's just going over his speech. And the truth is, there's a little bit of logic to the first part. Has he sinned against his father and heaven? Yes, creatively, and well done. He got a varsity letter in sin, okay? Like, this guy did everything possible to shame his dad. But then he says, "I'm no longer worthy to be called your son." Which that's bad news. Which is interesting because Jesus was telling a story of good news, and good news has some bad news, but the good news is not good news unless you remember that the bad news was preceded by some good news. Clear as mud? Okay, so here we go. The story doesn't start with "you're naughty, you're bad, you're terrible, but God's gonna give you a solid," okay? The story starts with God is so in love with you. He created you for relationship. He wants nothing more than a life of relationship with you. My sin, your sin, our sin separates us from God's best, and even worse, separates us from relationship with those around us, and even worse, separates us from relationship with God. We've all done it. And I don't know how deep you've gotten in hogwash like this kid did before you realized it. But it don't matter if you're like ankle deep or neck deep, Either way, our sin has separated us and put us in a distant land from God. But that's why God sent his son, emptied the bank account of heaven by sending Jesus Christ, his one and only son, the one he loved so much, to die for us, not to stay dead, but now have victory over death. So there is nothing more that can shame us. And so it was never about what we bring to the table. It was about how wild of a love God has for us and how much God would do to be able to cover anything that comes in between us. And that should motivate us to relationship with the Father. But when we rehearse a sloppy narrative that we have this shame and there's no way we can see the Father, it will delay our reunion because we will convince ourselves we're not worthy of going back home. And that will keep you locked in a pig pen long after you should start your journey home. And then it says, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him." Think about that. While he was still a long way off. I love that part. How did he know that the kid was coming home when he was a long way off? iPhone tracker? Oh, he's getting closer. I better start go looking now. Binoculars? No? This is called first century, right? I don't even think they had that back then. He knew he was a long way off because the dad was looking every day, looking all the day. He's always finding an excuse to hang out on his porch, sitting on that Cracker Barrel lobby, rocker of his on his porch. People trying to talk to him, but he'll never make eye contact because he doesn't want to miss the moment that his son might be coming home. Always looking at the horizon. Maybe today's the day. Maybe this is the day my son's coming home. What is that? Is that oh, no, that's a Greyhound bus. And I don't know if those existed back then. But what is that in the no, that's just a rabbit. Every day. Can you imagine the family saying, hey, honey, I think you're living in the past. Why don't you come inside? No. Because if he comes home today, I got to see him. And it says while he saw his son a long way off, it says he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So the son starts going out with his rehearsed speech. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Please make me like one of your hired servants. And the dad says, shut up! That's not in that version of scripture. It's in the, I don't know. But I would imagine he said, shut up. He's like, this isn't a day for apologies. It's too late to apologize. He says, it's time for a party. It's time for a party. And he says, quick, bring my son the robe. Put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet, and kill that fat old pudgy cattle. Because we're going to have ourselves a barbecue up in here, y'all. Why? Because my son who is dead is now alive. The son who was lost is now found. And today was a day to party. Well, this story is interesting. Here's the general theme of what we can look at from a 30,000-foot view. I put it in my notes this way, that when I deserve a penalty because my choices, God designs a party. It doesn't make sense because love makes you act crazy. When I deserve a penalty, love made God design a party and saying, this is a day to celebrate. And all of us are probably aware of the penalty that we have incurred. All of us understand that it's our sin that has caused death in relationships around you. It's our sin that has distanced us from God. Side note, I will say it this way. The father could have tried to control his son and just hemmed him in and made it like a penitentiary instead of a palace. But he did a painful display of love by allowing his son, the one he loves so much, to even journey away from the protection of the father. And I don't know if you've got someone in your life that you love a lot that's not making the kind of decisions you wish they would make. If you're like me, you just try and control those decisions. You're like, well, I'll just take those decisions away from you, right? Trust me, I know what's best for you. I think one of the truths here is sometimes the best thing you can do for someone who's hell-bent on experiencing what they want to experience is let them experience what they think they want to experience. And when they do experience the weight or the fruit of their own choices, it's then that they can own this desire to be with the Father. Because I can control their feet to keep their feet close to me, but that doesn't mean their heart's going to be close to me. Now, I'm not saying when they're four, you introduce them to all type of stuff. Like, hey, here's all your liquor, here's all your drugs. You're going to have to figure this out sooner or later, so I'm just giving you a head start. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, though, is when there comes a time where it's hard for you to control, maybe your role isn't control. Maybe your role is to pray that a loving father would do everything possible to give them chance after chance after chance after chance to make their own decision to want to have a relationship. And we see that that's exactly what happened to the son. And then the father gives him some gifts. The first gift is a robe, and a robe covers the son with dignity, right? Now think about this for a second. What was the kid covered with before? He came from the pig pen. He was broke. He didn't stop at a Mervyn's and get some new duds on the way home. He had no money. And when you're hanging out in a pig pen, you don't hide that very well. You can't even go into a Denny's without smelling like smoke. I bet you can't live and work and slop around in a pig pen without smelling like hogwash, right? So he's coming home wondering like, I know I smell. I know this is nasty, okay? This is gross. It's all over me. Everyone can smell it. And the father didn't say, oh, disgusting, man. You know we got rules. We got standards around here. Go and wash yourself. Change. Get out of that disgusting stuff. He just says, listen, I don't care where you've been. I'm just thrilled about where you are. Here's a robe to cover yourself because you are not what you've done. You are not where you've been. You are my son, and I want you to have dignity. I don't care what you smell like. I don't care what your record says. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what you did yesterday. I want you to understand that God sees you as someone with dignity. No matter what the big dogs in the synagogues look down on you for, I guarantee you God is saying, I want to cover you with dignity because I created you for relationship. Second gift he gave him, and I've swapped order, is sandals. He slapped him with some flip-flops, which that shows his identity. Because in that culture, if you were going to go into a house, you had to take your shoes off, which is similar to probably a lot of us, like you just vacuum the floor and you're like, hey, what are you doing wearing your shoes in that living room? I just vacuumed that floor, right? Or maybe it's muddy, rainy day and you got to take your shoes off outside. If you were a family member, you were the only ones allowed to wear shoes inside the house. It was a statement of his identity. Father, I'm sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like a hired servant. Shut up. Here's your sandals, son. This is your house. And then he gives him a ring. And that ring, man, that was an expression of his authority. That's like his American Express black card. He's got the family signet ring. Charge it to my dad's account, y'all. And that's what we get when we return to the Father. Like, we don't get a credit check based on our own account. Our account goes to God's. And he's got a higher limit, right? Like that's a good news. I put my righteousness is a financial term from the first century that it goes on your account. My righteousness is your credit check, not my credit check, because my righteousness is bankrupt, okay? When you run my credit check, it'll show you all the wrong things I've done. But God's righteousness, he makes it right. He makes it in good standing. He balances it because of what's in his account. And we are not held accountable, that's the word there, because of what we've done. We're held to a higher account that God has us covered. And it doesn't make sense. It's not good financial stewardship. This guy should have probably been on probation. He probably shouldn't have been trusted with a family reunion yet, but maybe in 3 years we do a job performance evaluation and we'll see how you're doing at that point. But love makes you act crazy. The dad said, I'm covering you with dignity. I'm reminding you of your identity. And I'm handing out authority. Because my son was dead and now he's alive. He was lost and now he's found. It's scandalous. It's scandalous what that kid did. Right? He needed a good talking to. Right? Like pig farmer, really? And you're going to post that? You know what that did to your mom? Your dad? But the only thing more scandalous than the life of the kid was the love of the father. The only thing that was more outlandish and outrageous than the life of this kid was the love of his dad. And I know some of us might feel like, what I've done or what I've been doing doesn't fit. God's not happy with me. Jesus would say, once upon a time, there was a God who loved you so much. And the most creative, disgusting thing you think you've done wasn't enough to keep you at a distance from God. He scans the horizon. He fattens a calf just in case. And he's waiting for you today. Now, I want to share one more aspect of the story that makes it come alive to me. I think it might be helpful. It's from a book called the Jerusalem Talmud, which is a collection of stories that predates Jesus, but around that time, that the religious leaders read, memorized. This was like their case study of how to handle grievances and sins, and they had a bunch of stories. In the Jerusalem Talmud that Jesus' original hearers would have been very familiar with, there's a story about a prodigal son. A son who out of rebellion leaves the home of his father and goes out and wastes everything in wild living. And then he decides one day to come home. And the father sees him coming way off in the horizon and runs out to meet him with a big old pot. And he gets to his son and he makes a big to-do, raises the pot like it's little Simba, and then spikes it on the ground like an imitation of a Travis Kelce touchdown celebration. Shatters the pot, picks up a shard of the pot, and says, just as this pot has been shattered and can no longer be repaired, because of what you have done, our relationship is shattered and can no longer be repaired. You are no longer part of this family, and you are no longer allowed on this property. That was the story of the prodigal son in the Jewish literature, the Talmud, that these religious leaders were very familiar with. And this ceremony was so popular, it's called a kazaza ceremony. A kazaza ceremony is when you would publicly let all of your community know, this relationship's cut off. It's broken beyond repair. So when Jesus is telling this familiar story, with a twist ending, he's baiting these religious leaders like, I know, get to the good part where you kazaza that fool. And Jesus says, well, he was still a long way off. He doesn't say this part, but I can imagine he picked up a jar and they're like, yeah. And he runs out to his kid. And in the jar, he pulls out a robe like a magician, and sandals. It's a big jar. And a ring. And he says, son, I love you. I've always loved you. Let's have a party. When you're expecting a kazaza and you get a kawawa instead, can you imagine how mad his original hearers were? They're like, no! Because if that's true, everything I know about God is wrong. If that's true, my love isn't based on what I'm doing. If that's true, then anybody could get in. No! That's why they killed him. You don't kill Mr. Rogers. You kill a guy who threatens everything that you're trying to oppress others with. Love makes you act crazy, friends. And if you're here today and you're wondering if there's a God who's going to kazaza you up in the throat, or a God who's going to throw a party, I want you to know about a love of a Father who will not stop, who's looking on the horizon. I'm going to invite our worship teams to come forward to each of our campuses, and we're going to celebrate an anti-kazaza celebration. We're going to celebrate what it means for anyone and everyone to say, I want relationship with God through water baptism. Now, those of you who have already prepared to get baptized and signed up, and they already told you where to go at whatever campus, you can head that way. I'm sure it's in a hallway or it's indoors. If you get outside, you've gone too far, but they probably gave you instructions, and you can make your way to prepare for baptism. We're going to celebrate in just a second. But as they do that, I want you all to know this. There is nothing that can separate you from the love of God. And I know that your sin will cost. It costs you opportunities. It costs you relationships. It costs you time. It costs Jesus his life, but he wasn't a bystanding victim. He gladly paid the price, died on a cross to show what scandalous love the Father has, rose from the dead, and now offers us freedom and life. So no matter what you're doing, how deep you are in your messy life, today's a day to come home. And if you need to make that decision, I don't want you for a second to think that shame is a good enough reason for you to stay in the pig pen. There's a loving God who's scanning the horizon now. And are you ready to say yes to Jesus? You just say, man, my sin separated me from you and your best. It's hurt a lot of people. Forgive me my sin. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just make me like one of your hired. Shut up! You're my son. You're my daughter. Baptism is a celebration of those who have made that decision. Baptism doesn't make you a follower of Jesus. It's just an expression of a decision you've already made. And it's an identification with Jesus, that just as Jesus was buried and rose again, people go in the water. It's kind of like a water funeral. You're buried, your sin symbolically, and once the sin bubbles come to the surface, we raise you back up to life, right? It's just connecting with what Jesus did, saying, hey, now I live in a loving relationship with God, not because of what I've done, because of what he's done, and now I want to reflect that love. And in just a moment, people are going to come into the tank at each of our campuses. We're going to have that opportunity, and we want to celebrate that. We want to be the kind of people that say, hey, this is a barbecue. Let's do this thing. And if you know your next step is water baptism, how would you know that? If you're making that decision right now to follow Jesus, or you've made that decision and haven't gone public, water baptism, Jesus was baptized. He asked us to be baptized. It's a big deal. If you've not yet done that, and that's your next step, this is an interesting moment. I'm gonna encourage you in just a moment to get out of your seat, get some material. We've got clothes, we've got shorts, we've got shirts, we've got towels. They still smell like Walmart, okay? This is great. We've got everything you would need for this decision. We prepared even if you're unprepared. We've got everything you need. In just a moment, I'm gonna have you, if you know that's your next step, and you wanna say, I wanna make a public statement that I've made relationship with a Father, and you can join in line in just a moment. We wanna include you in this celebration. But today, let's just make another commitment to be the kind of community that we're quick to run and be part of a celebration, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, because you want to return to the Father. So would you stand with me if you're able to? I want to have a quick word of prayer, and then we'll get going. But Father, today, for those who